Of course, I want to have Jimmy Stein's countdown today, but here's another philosophical question for you. What does adding Oklahoma right before the Iron Bowl do to the rivalry?
You are Locked On Bama, your daily podcast on the Alabama Crimson Tide, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back into Locked On Bama. Luke Robinson, that's me. Jimmy Stein, that's him. And I'm getting a phone call right now, which I can't believe, but it's just the way it goes.
Angry listener, probably.
Already hated my cold open. But regardless, Jimmy, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and thank you for making this your first listen every single day. So, Jimmy, we want to get into your countdown, which we will do, because that's really fun right now. But, it was funny. I got a question on X, Twitter, whatever. I hate to say X. It makes it feel like I'm watching something I shouldn't be watching, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I've rebelled against it. I
do watch things I shouldn't watch on X.
It's like NFL teams that move, and always get upset when any NFL team moves. So I refuse. I still call them the San Diego Chargers. For instance, the Oakland Raiders.
Okay.
I mean, it's not that I'm against there being a team in Vegas. It's just that the Raiders are the Oakland Raiders. It's going to take a while for me to acknowledge that they moved. Agreed. So I'm sort of that same way as you are about that.
Okay, agree. Now, so I got a question on Twitter from, I think, the Locked On Sooners folks, and they were like, okay, Alabama normally has a patsy before the Iron Bowl, which is very true. And Auburn does too. And just about everybody in the SEC has a patsy that week. So what does adding Oklahoma in that slot do to the rivalry? Now, there'll be some people going, what do you mean was it do the rivalry? I still hate Auburn as much as anybody. Okay, me too. But I'm going to tell you, I think this is going to erode slowly, like erosion does, slowly erode the hatred in the rivalry. And the hatred is what makes the Iron Bowl great. What I'm saying is, if you have to play, I'm just throwing, I don't even know what our whole schedule is right now, but let's say you have to play Kentucky, and then you play Oklahoma, and then you play Auburn, every year. Now, Oklahoma won't be every year, but you know what I mean. That's going to take a little bit of the shine off of the Iron Bowl. I'm just telling you, I can see that coming. That's one of the things I really hate about all this expansion nonsense, unless we expand fully the way that I think we're ultimately going to, and go ahead and get this done where you get all patsies out of the way. Let's just go straight like the NFL and go, everybody's playing an NFL team now, or NFL light team. Am I making any sense to you, Jimmy?
Some like usually you're making sense some of the time. I can see the Oklahoma game the week before the Auburn game taking some shine off the Auburn game, because so much of the focus late in the season is going to be on Alabama's trip to Norman. That's going to be a huge focus. Let's be honest. Oklahoma's probably a better team than Auburn right now, or this year. So Alabama's trip to Norman is going to be a much tougher game than the home game against Auburn. And I think, though, if some of the lusters are moved from Alabama-Auburn, instead of pointing the finger at Oklahoma and the SEC for this schedule, I would say some of the blame lies at Auburn's feet. Now, Auburn has definitely pushed Alabama on some games over there, Jordan-Hare. I'm not talking about how close the Alabama-Auburn games have been and Auburn. What I'm talking about, Luke, is the Alabama-Auburn game is big when both Alabama and Auburn are both really good teams and fighting for a postseason berth, fighting for a spot in the SEC championship game. And frankly, Auburn hasn't held up their end of the deal lately. They haven't been very good in a while. I just saw recently a stat about their one-loss record against Power 5 opponents. Just Power 5 opponents alone over the past 3 or 4 years is pretty abysmal. And I think, if anything, it's not so much the trip to Oklahoma as it's going to be, hey, is Auburn 6-5 going into the Iron Bowl again? Or are they more like 8-3 or 9-2? And it's a heck of a big game. But if Auburn is just 6-5 heading to Bryant-Denny, it's still a rival. It's still Auburn, but Alabama's going to be a 17 or 18 point favorite in the game. And most Alabama fans, I think, at that point will be looking forward to maybe a trip to Atlanta to play Georgia or Texas.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And that's what I'm saying is like the Iron Bowl sort of had its own moment because we did take essentially a week off where everybody gets a deep breath with playing Mercer or Alabama A&M. And again, no offense to Mercer or Alabama A&M. You know what I mean, though. And now, because I was watching my friends on an Auburn show the other day, and they were talking about, what does Texas and Oklahoma coming in the SEC do, for each individual sport? Where does it put Auburn? Does it knock them down a peg? Does it not really change them? And I said, look, I looked up in football. It clearly knocks Auburn down a peg or 2 pegs in football. Alabama has the second most wins in college football history, right above Ohio State with Alabama's got 965. Ohio State has 964. Michigan's got 1,004. But then Texas has 948. Oklahoma has 944. And then you also have, by the way, Georgia, Tennessee, LSU, before you get to Auburn, who's tied for 18th with 799 wins. So I think clearly those two coming in knocks Auburn down a peg. And then their argument was, well, but what have they done lately? And my argument back was, what has Auburn done lately? I mean, that's
right.
Texas just made the playoffs.
And Texas has done a lot lately, by the way, and they're going to be good again. I mean, Oklahoma, I can see an Auburn fan saying, how do you know Oklahoma's going to be better than Auburn? I think that's a fair question. I think that's a very fair question. That's a fair question. Now, I personally predict that Oklahoma will be better than Auburn this year. I'd predict that, but I'd agree that it's a fair question. But Texas is right up there, in my opinion. There's about 4 or 5 really, really good programs this year in terms of looking at their roster before the year starts, and Texas is one of them, along with Alabama. But I think
in that vein, Jimmy, this is where I think it hurts us. Now, again, it won't be Oklahoma every time, but I'm saying, like, specifically for this year, I think it hurts us more than Auburn this particular year because we've got to go to Oklahoma. It's going to be a huge deal. First of all, the weather is going to be completely different than what we're used to. It could be just snowing like nobody's business over there. You don't know what's going on in Oklahoma. Nobody knows.
It could be hot or cold. It could be hot or cold in Oklahoma in November. I
mean, Oklahoma is where meteorologists go to die because they just can't keep up with the changes. I'm completely making that up. But so, we've got to get prepared to go on the road and play. Now, Auburn plays A&M before us. That's going to be a tough game too. I'm not saying Auburn, gets off somehow. What I'm saying is I think it hurts us more because we've got to get up for, a big SEC game before Auburn. And it feels like Auburn always is up for us one way or the other. Like even when Auburn's bad, they have played us tough. I will give them tons of credit. Like we don't always give them a lot of credit
for that. They find a way. We're playing Auburn in baseball this weekend. We're playing Auburn in baseball this weekend.
Auburn's going to win 2 this weekend at least.
They're dead last. They're dead last in the league in baseball. They have not been good at all. They won't make even to Hoover, much less the NCAA tournament. Alabama is, regardless of what happens in Auburn this weekend. Alabama is going to go to the NCAA tournament in baseball, but Auburn will find a way to win more games than they should and make that a highly competitive series because Auburn's very good at, hey, when Alabama shows up to a sporting event in Auburn, they play well. They do it. They're very consistent with that. I give them a lot of credit for, hey, they get up for the big game.
And again,
the big game is when Alabama comes down.
And again, I'm saying this as a compliment. Like I wish Alabama got up for Auburn as much as Auburn gets up for Alabama. I wish, but they don't. They haven't for the most part. I want them to because I'm close to Auburn, but it feels like they don't. Because frankly, these last couple of years, especially in Jordan-Hare, now in Tuscaloosa, we have beaten the brakes off of them for the most part, but in Jordan-Hare, we've clearly had the better teams and we've clearly played poorly. Now, some of that is due to Auburn playing so great. I'm not trying to discount that. Some of it is also to just some really boneheaded decisions by us and just lack of effort at times. I mean, even
Alabama's
in 09,
also struggled in a lot of SEC road games going back to like 2021. I would say 21, 22, 23. The road performances overall have just been pretty poor, especially the Auburn games. But overall, they've played pretty poorly. Remember, Alabama almost lost to Florida in Gainesville the year they fired Dan Mullen.
and we were up 21-0 or something, right? Or 21-3.
Up early, but barely held on with Bryce Young at quarterback and barely held on to win.
All right, I'm going to tell everybody about my good friends over at FanDuel because, speaking of games coming up, I mean, look, the NBA is winner take all time right now, and NHL too. And FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big old win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, of course, I mean, as if I have to tell you this, they are America's number one sportsbook. Okay, so countdown time again. And this is it's getting into the juicier part because you're on the fringe of guys we think could play at this point. Jeremiah Beeman comes in at number 79. This is a player from Parker that very good player, very strong. He stuck it out with Bama. He was getting overtures from a lot of other teams. I appreciate Jeremiah Beeman's stick-to-itiveness. I know that's not a word. Don't care. And I just think this is a guy, hey, I'm not saying 100% he's going to redshirt.
Yeah, I agree. There's a chance he won't. I just think I have him still as a projected redshirt. Has almost nothing to do with Jeremiah Beeman. Has everything to do with the depth of the room. Alabama's defensive line is among the deepest position groups on the team in terms of just overall numbers. There are 14 defensive linemen on scholarship for only 3 spots on the field. So with 14 guys for 3 spots, I think all of the freshmen, the true freshmen like Jeremiah Beeman, are likely to redshirt. That's why we've already gone over, for instance, Asaya Fonga, for instance, who we had even lower in the countdown, and Steve Mbuamwa that we had, even lower in the countdown. I think Beeman is going to be a great player. I think he's not going to be good. I think Beeman has a chance to be great. I think I see some Quinnen Williams in Jeremiah Beeman. I'm not saying he's going to be as good as Q. That's entirely unrealistic. I'm just saying Jeremiah Beeman's story, his current size, his home locale, all of these things are similar to Quinnen Williams, who also, by the way, redshirted in his freshman year, like I believe Jeremiah Beeman is likely to. I think Beeman's going to be great. I think that Beeman might make a significant move as soon as next spring. He was here this spring and did pretty well from what I hear. I think he's going to be a good player. I just think the room is too deep, and there's just no reason to waste a year on him again. I think a fair comp is Quinnen Williams, who also redshirted, because Quinnen Williams showed up in the 265 range, and that's where Beeman is. I think Beeman's got to add weight, but once he gets up to 290, like Q did, I think he's going to be a very difficult player to block.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I just think he can, it just depends on how this defense. I mean, I think our defensive line is like B plus, but I don't see any. Do you see any bona fide like NFL stars in the making here?
I think the first team is guys that will play in the NFL. I think Tim Smith, Tim Keenan, and Jaheim Otis are guys that will play in the NFL. Damon Payne is probably an NFL. James Smith, I think, could develop into a big star down the road. I just don't see Jeremiah Beeman stealing snaps from that level of player yet. I think he's just clearly a backup, and since he's a freshman that needs to add weight and clearly a backup, I think the wise move here is redshirting him. But that is not to say that Jeremiah Beeman couldn't play and couldn't help out and would play okay, I think, if given a shot. But I just don't see him jumping any of those guys. Alabama's got at least 7 or 8 guys for just 2 spots. because one of the defensive line spots now is the bandit spot. And Beeman didn't play at bandit this spring. He was actually with the defensive tackles this spring, and he's a little small for that spot right now. But he's gonna get there quickly. I think he'll be a 290-pound player, probably within just a year or less than 2.
Okay, I'm with you on that. So let's go ahead and get into Caden Jones just a little bit here. As for whatever reason, in my thing it says Sonata at the end. It's supposed to say Ionata. I think it automatically corrected, and I don't care. I'm not changing it. I might change it when you're talking here in a minute, but.
Yeah, I mean, I noticed that right off that it's and the funny thing about that is you only missed it by one letter. It's an S instead of an I, but because of just the one letter that you missed, it looks butchered. It looks like you missed several letters. It looks like, boy, that's not even close. That's way off. He's talking about someone else. It looks so. But you actually only missed by one. You actually only missed by one letter. But Ionata to Sonata feels like a major miss. But
I mean, it's like going from an Audi to a Sonata. I mean, I guess isn't a Sonata kind of a like low to mid range car?
It is a car. It's like, yeah, we went from Ferrari to Sonata, but yeah, we'll do Caden Jones first. And we sort of covered Caden Jones, I feel, because we've done QB Reese and Sterling Dixon, and Caden Jones. I do have ahead of both of those guys, but I still think Caden. Again, if I'm betting, I'm saying redshirt. There's just too many inside linebackers. Jahad Campbell and Deontay Lawson are clearly the starters. They'll play almost all the snaps if they're healthy. And they have veteran backups in Justin Jefferson and Jeremiah Alexander, who will play at the end of games or fill in case of injury. So there's 4 guys. Now, here's the deal, though. There's only 4, as Luke pointed out. Luke was insistent on yesterday's show, and I agree. I think one of these inside linebackers is probably going to play because you need a 5th guy, and inside linebackers are typically good special teams players. So one of them's going to play, but there's 4 of them, and it's kind of hard to guess which one. I'm going to guess Okoronkwo is actually the guy that plays. Other people will say, whoa, he's the one least likely to play because he English is a second language for him. So he's the one furthest from playing. I get that argument. I get it. I'm just saying he's the most likely one to play because he played so well on A-Day, and which is the most game-like thing. But regardless of that, Caden Jones might be the guy that plays because he had a good spring. There's a lot to like about Caden Jones. He's playing inside, but he has a versatile skill set. He could play an outside spot. This is a guy that could play the wolf position, but he's playing inside for now. Very high productive player at, from what I understand, is a big high school in North Carolina where they win a lot and play a lot of good competition. Caden is a smart kid. He's got good intangibles. He's going to be a really good teammate, and he plays the run and the pass equally well as a prospect. That's going to serve him well in the SEC. So Caden Jones, I'm saying redshirt. If I had to bet, I would go redshirt. But like Luke pointed out when the show started, we're at that point in the list where I won't be shocked if he plays. I think he might end up proving to be the 5th inside linebacker, which would put him in pretty good position going into next spring in terms of making a run at the lineup.
So now, first of all, speaking of Okoronkwo, which we'll get to later, but I wonder how many German cuss words he's taught people so far. When I was taking French,
there's one or two good ones, I guess. But
when I was taking French, one of the first things I learned was merde tête, and that means basically poop head. So another word for it. But so anyway, I just wonder. All German words sound like cuss words, kind of like when you say "Schadenfreude." And so, like, what would you call me? Schadenfreude's a great word, by the way. We need more words in English for things like that, like taking the pleasure out of somebody else's demise.
You just said it in English.
What a great thing. I know I said it, but we need a word.
You need one word. You want one word instead of 9.
I want one word instead of 9.
Or instead of a sentence. I want to use a word, not a sentence.
Like Molly Poppy. I'm making something up off the top of my head.
That's a good one, though. Yeah,
I don't know what it
that's a Disney. That's a Disney made up word there. That's a good one.
If Disney makes a movie about Schadenfreude, I'll tell you what, I have some Schadenfreude when it comes to Disney occasionally.
Sounds like a word that they used in like Harry Potter or something. Molly Poppy.
Yeah.
I'm going to turn her into a Molly Poppy.
I got some Molly Poppy in my Schadenfreude. Okay, so let's go to Joseph Ionata. All right, this is a dude that, all right, now if you thought we were being optimistic about the previous two guys playing and not redshirting, I don't think you're being optimistic now. I feel like this dude's going to get on the field. Tell me I'm wrong, Jimmy. Tell me I'm wrong.
Here's the best case for Ionata getting on the field. Until Gino Vandermark transfer portaled over, Ionata was going to be the number 2 center, most likely. And if you're the number 2 center, you're playing. I mean, there's absolutely no doubt you're playing. Also, the offensive line opposite of the defensive line, where you don't have good numbers. I said there's 14 defensive linemen for 3 spots on the field. Well, there's also 14 offensive linemen for 5 spots on the field. So offensive line, there's just not as much depth. And again, Ionata was the second-team center until Gino Vandermark transfer portal to Alabama just in the past few days. So based on that, you would say, well, Ionata is going to play this fall, and he might. I'm still going redshirt because I think Gino Vandermark will now be the second-team center, and Ionata is now a third-team player, and I think third-team offensive linemen, if they're true freshmen, should redshirt, and I think he should. But boy, regardless, I mean, you hate talking about injuries in the offseason, but injuries are a part of football and they happen. I'm saying he's going to redshirt, but I'm also saying he's just one sprained ankle away from having to play. I mean, because if you're a number 2 player on the offensive line, you need to play because you could so easily be thrust in there and have to play against LSU. You better have some game experience. So I'm going to say Ionata is going to redshirt as a center and not play in more than 4 games. But like Luke is saying, that we're to that part of the list now where it's a shaky bet. And the reason I have Ionata, by the way, this high is that very fact. He could easily play. And in coming days, by the way, very shortly, we'll be talking about another offensive lineman that even though I'm going to project he's a third-team player, I'm almost certain will play.
Yeah, and I think that's the key is like he will redshirt, but he will also play up to those 4 games. And, there's the other thing about the dangerous thing about redshirting is if somebody knows they're going to redshirt from the jump, all that does is give them motivation to go somewhere else. It makes them probably disinterested. It feeds their boredom. So when you're bored, what do kids these days do now? They start looking at stuff. What are you going to start looking at? The transfer portal. And I mean, it's so different now. And sometimes I think our age group misunderstands what's going on. Like I'm telling you, I got a 7-year-old daughter. I got a 20-year-old. I got a 17 and a 14. And like, they need to be entertained instantly, like at that moment. So if I say, hey, we're going to the mall or to the summit or whatever, and who goes to the mall? There's another thing, dating myself. But I mean, we're going to the summit or to going to the movie. And they're like, okay, let's go. And I'm like, well, it doesn't start for another hour and a half. Oh, well, I'm going to do something else. Like there's no, like it's instant gratification all across the board. So this isn't necessarily targeted at Joseph Ionata, but what I'm saying is he may not be this way. But I think kids now, you can't tell a kid, hey, look, we plan on redshirting you, because they will immediately look for something that gives them instant gratification. And at least if they get in the portal, there's something going on in their life. It's almost like they have to have at least constant distractions instead of seeing the big picture. Some kids do. I mean, like a Dallas Turner. I mean, as soon as he started making NIL money, he started saving it. He didn't start spending it on clothes and cars. He started doing smart stuff. But most of the kids are going to do the clothes and cars bit, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't think now, of course, I don't know. I'm not there for these conversations, but I'm just guessing that in today's game, because they can play up to 4 games and because you have the transfer portal and like Luke's talking about, I think for those very reasons that Luke is saying, I don't think there's a conversation with Ionata that happens in fall camp or before the first game that says, hey, look, you're going to be redshirted. I think the conversation is this: you're the number 3 center, and right now it's Brailsford's going to be the starter and Vandermark is the backup, And what I need you to do is push Vandermark, and I need you to practice and do what you can to beat Vandermark out. That's the next spot. That's the next spot for you. Show us that you're better than Vandermark in practice and get ready to play. Get ready to play, because the number 2 guy is going to play every week. And if Brailsford or Vandermark, either one of them twists an ankle, now you're playing in the game that week. So I need you to get ready every week like you're going to play, because you might. And I think that's the conversation. And then at the end of the year, you total up how many games he got in. And if you got in 4 or less, then he qualified for a red shirt, and you never really did have the conversation with him. He just redshirted because he played in 4 games or less. But I don't know that you have the conversation with players anymore that, hey, this is the plan. We're going to redshirt you. Kind of like how Nate Oates did with Chris Parker. That was a conversation that they even publicized. Hey, we had a talk and we decided to try and redshirt you. Now, if several players have been hurt and Chris Parker had to play, then they would have revisited it. But I bet that conversation is something that doesn't happen very much in football for the reasons that Luke pointed out. You don't want to.
Where did Chris Parker end up?
He has not decided yet, and I'll tell you, rumors that we're hearing is West Virginia.
Okay. All right, that's going to do it for today's podcast. We may be back tomorrow. We don't know yet. It's crazy. So we'll see. Weather dependent.
And it is going to. Funny you should mention that. Tomorrow is Friday, and it is going to rain all day.
So until then,
Tuscaloosa anyway.
roll tide.
Roll Tide.